You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we're talking about Hadron Collision, track number 5 on 2012's Failed States. This is our 6th Failed States episode, so we're halfway through that album, not including the bonus tracks. And yes, we will do the bonus tracks.
I am currently tracking down some materials for one of the bonus tracks as well, which has been a very fun project that I've been embarking upon recently. If people have been following us on social media, I'm sure they've picked up on what I'm up to out there. But Keith, how are you feeling at this halfway point through Failed States? Are you pumped about Hadron Collision? How are you feeling?
Well, I wouldn't have even thought of it at first of being halfway through. I didn't make that connection. So with this being my favorite propaganda album and probably my favorite album just ever, that is exciting to say, but also a bit of a bummer because I don't want to burn through this one so quickly because I love it so much. And after talking about gifts last week, which felt like less pressure, while this song being more substantial or a little heavier in terms of the topics it addresses, it still doesn't feel as overwhelming or as intimidating as some other songs. So taking a bit of a break from some heavy things for a bit, I think it's a good avenue as we try to navigate the news. I try to navigate the first weeks of parenthood, but I'm stoked to talk about this anyway. Any way you slice it.
Yeah, me too. So I want to start off by talking a little bit about the name of the song, Hadron Collision, which is named after the CERN particle accelerator in Switzerland. So, this is something that I believe I read about in a pulp novel a long time ago. I think this was the plot point of a major novel at one point. I can't remember exactly where, but I'm sure people are yelling the name of the book in their headphone through their headphones right now. But so I looked it up just to find a little more detail, and CERN's website says that the Large Hadron Collider is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator, which started up on September 10th, 2008, and remains the latest addition to CERN's accelerator complex. The Large Hadron Collider consists of a 27-kilometer ring of superconducting magnets with a number of accelerating structures to boost the energy of the particles along the way. And inside the accelerator, there are 2 high-energy particle beams traveling at close to the speed of light before they are made to collide. And the beams travel in opposite directions in separate beam pipes, 2 tubes kept at ultra high vacuum. And they are guided around the accelerator ring by a strong magnetic field maintained by superconducting electromagnets. And the electromagnets are built from coils of special electric cable that operates in a superconducting state, efficiently conducting electricity without resistance or loss of energy. And it is required to chill the magnets to minus 271.3 degrees Celsius.
Holy
which is
smokes.
Colder than outer space, apparently. And for this reason, much of the accelerator is connected to a distribution system of liquid helium, which cools the magnets, as well as to other supply services. And thousands of magnets of different varieties and sizes are used to direct the beams around the accelerator. And they're, so there's so much going on here. And just prior to a collision inside the accelerator, another type of magnet is used to squeeze the particles closer together to increase the chances of a collision. And the particles are so little that the task of making them collide is akin to firing 2 sewing needles 10 kilometers apart with such precision that they meet halfway.
Wow.
Isn't that insane?
Wow.
So I was just absolutely blown away reading about this. And I pulled all of that directly from CERN's website. And I felt that it was so well said that even a total moron like me can understand it. And I was just completely blown away. But after reading about this, I realized that I had no idea what even the purpose of a particle accelerator even is. And I had the general gist of what was happening based on the descriptions, but then I was like, well, to what end? So I discovered that particle acceleration science matters to consumer products like computer chips,
Mm.
plastic, shrink wrap, medical procedures such as radioisotopes emitting X-rays or gamma rays, or radiation therapy for medical diagnosis, and also in national security cargo inspection and stockpile stewardship. So crazy cool description of the process and the purpose behind it for why we have this process. Did you do any research on particle acceleration? Because I was like geeking out about this so hard.
Yeah, aside from just thinking, okay, it accelerates particles,
Right. Yeah.
but okay, so what does that mean and what does it do and why? I deferred to Phil Plait, who's an astronomer known for his bad astronomy
Oh,
blog.
I've seen that.
Yeah, and he's hosted and written episodes for Crash Course Astronomy. He wrote for Bill Nye Saves the World.
Oh, cool.
And he's done a ton of other science shows. He has a really cool book called Death from Above about all the different scientific ways the world could end.
Mm.
And he also goes on this Star Trek cruise every year. And he posts about it on social media because he's like a huge Trekkie. And I was really bummed not to be able to follow along. But Phil Plait explains that all of what you just described, Greg, accelerating particles and crashing them together, scientists are aiming to recreate the conditions that existed when the world was just a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second old.
Ooh.
High energetic particle soup, he calls it. And he writes, by colliding protons together, the Large Hadron Collider is letting us peer back in time and see how the universe itself created the reality around us. So back in
Oh, that's intense.
2012, the Large Hadron Collider made the news after confirming the existence of a theoretical Higgs boson particle. It's also known as the God particle, which helps give mass to all elementary particles that have mass, like electrons, neutrons, protons. So bosons are subatomic particles that carry energy, which calculations required them to be massless, but some were observed with mass. And the theoretical physicist, Peter Higgs, proposed the idea that there was a field everywhere that gave these particles their mass. So if this field was excited by high energy collisions, shuffling the field could create, albeit very briefly, another particle, the Higgs boson. But the issue with this is that the particle isn't easy to detect because once it forms, it decays in a burst of energy and particle shrapnel very quickly. So the only way to make them is to smash the particles together, like you described, at incredibly high speeds and energies, and then to look at the resulting collisions. And if the Higgs exists, then it would decay and give off a characteristic bit of energy. But the problem is, Phil Plait explains, is that lots of things give off that much energy. So you have to see the Higgs signal on top of all of that noise, and you have to collide particles over and over again, countless times, to build up that tiny signal from the Higgs decay. And the more you do it, the bigger the signal gets and the more confident you could be that the detection is real.
Oh my gosh, dude. And in 2012, so the Higgs was discovered then, the God particle in 2012. And you know what else happened in 2012? Failed states came out.
Yeah,
Or
I didn't
what
even
else?
think about it. Yeah. So in 2008, a single wire in the 10,000 wires used for the superconducting magnets failed, and it actually damaged the Hadron Collider, and it could only run on half the potential power once they fixed it. But even with this limited power, they still discovered it. So the Nobel Prize was given in physics in 2013. It was awarded to two scientists jointly, Francois Englert and Peter Higgs, on October 8th for the discovery of the Higgs boson. And it answered the question, why do particles have mass? But it also has created some other scientific questions, or it has other implications. Like it's helped scientists move closer to answering things like, what exactly is dark matter, the unobservable matter that is estimated to make up 85% of the universe's matter, and what happened after the Big Bang? Will this particle allow for some sort of limitless energy? Determining the mass of the Higgs boson leads to other questions, as one mass would seem to indicate that other unknown particles exist, while another mass of the particle suggests that the multiverse theory might be correct. And now the Large Hadron Collider is even more powerful as it continues to try to answer these questions as more and more questions pile up. So on top of the new scientific discoveries, which on their own are super interesting and important, developing new technologies that you described, also to store and process a colossal amount of data. These technologies eventually get replicated and they find their ways into our homes, into our cities. But it also brings attention back to science in a huge way, and in a way that isn't divisive like so many other scientific discussions, whether that's about stem cells
Right.
or evolution or, so much of the
Climate change.
Exactly. So maybe this could be a bit more unifying and bringing people together. And I read something from Brian Cox, a University of Manchester particle physics professor who works on the Atlas project. And he describes the Hadron Collider has captured the imagination of the global public, putting physics on the front page for the first time since the Apollo missions of the 1960s. And he said, there's no reason to believe we have discovered everything. At any point in the past, we could have stopped and would have missed technology like medical imaging, motors, electricity, and using particle beams for cancer. It would be ridiculous that the human race should stop figuring out how the world works. And the quest to understand the universe time and time again leads to revolutions in ways we live our lives. And that last line is so perfect for this song, I think.
Absolutely. And so we had this multi-part song, right? We have a song that seems like half about riding bikes in a city during the winter, and another half that is like got all these like scientific and physics themes running throughout it. And I absolutely love that about this, that we have so many different topics that we can hit on.
Right.
And the science of the Hadron Collider is absolutely amazing. And, I always knew that this thing existed, but I never knew exactly what these particle accelerators and colliders, what the purpose of it was. I was like, is this just like for fun? You know what I mean? And like, that's how stupid I was, like not even joking. Like I knew that it existed, but I didn't know why we had it. So we've got this fantastic rager of a tune and, about riding a bike in a city. And so before we move into our interview portion, Keith, I'm curious about what is your relationship to cycling in general for like exercise or commuting?
Yeah, I ride a bike more for fun than anything. It's really to clear my mind, not so much really exercise, to get fresh air, to listen to music or a podcast. And I rode it to work for a while, but now I mostly walk because I prefer it because it gives me more time to listen to stuff. And I don't know anything about bikes. I don't know how to fix them. I don't know how to maintain them. I bought an old Cannondale hybrid bike from the secretary at my school for like $100 because I didn't want to have to do any research. And everything that my friends were telling me to buy cost more than the Kelley Blue Book value of my car.
Oh, yeah.
So I just went with the first and closest and easiest option. And Northwest Indiana has some pretty decent bike trails, and they've grown in size, but also in popularity. But I'll admit that I've ridden my bike less and less the last few years. What about you, Greg?
So I was a really serious cyclist from about 2001 until about 2007. My first foray into cycling for fitness was because I got a job at a record store in St. Louis that I've mentioned several times on the show called Streetside Records. And one of my assistant managers and I hit it off really well. Like he was like super into like the bands Refused and Helmet and The Descendants. And so we became pals, but he was quite a bit older than me. And he was a cyclist. Like he raced bikes. He was, kitted out in the Lycra gear with the fancy shoes and the super expensive bike and everything. He had an awesome road rack on the bike rack on the top of his car. And so I was like looking up to this person who was like somebody that I liked and somebody that I wanted to emulate. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go knock out 40 miles after work. And I'm like, what the heck is he talking about? So he told me that he had a second job at the bike shop down the street called Sunset Cyclery in Sunset Hills, Missouri. And so I went down there and I found a Le Mans named after the Tour de France winner, Greg LeMond, a Le Mans Buenos Aires with an Ultegra Shimano, set of components on the bike. And I basically impulse bought a super expensive road bike. And I was living at home and, I was working a job. So I had a little bit of money and my living expenses were zero. And so I bought this bike and I just started riding 20 miles, 30 miles, 40 miles. And then before you knew it, I was riding constantly. And so I got really into road cycling just before college. But I had terrible bike handling skills. So I never really got into mountain biking. I'm almost 6'5", so I looked like a total crazy person, like a giant on this tiny, skinny bicycle. But I spent all of my college years riding my bike. I rode between 100 and 250 miles a week, usually in the countryside outside of Columbia, Missouri. I rode every day pretty much. I got really into cyclocross racing as well. So I raced cyclocross. I raced road bikes. I shaved my legs. I had the goofy jerseys and shorts. I learned how to change a flat tire on a road bike in 3 minutes. I would ride when it was 100 Fahrenheit outside or when it was below freezing. And one time when I was 20, I was riding on Clayton Road in St. Louis in a bright orange and blue bike jersey and shorts, bombing a downhill like 35, 37 miles an hour. And I got T-boned by a U.S. postal truck that pulled out of a neighborhood in front of me.
Oh, man.
So I was flying down this hill and I just smoked it right into the side of the mail truck.
Yikes.
And ironically, that's when U.S. Postal Service was sponsoring the team that Lance Armstrong was winning the Tour de France riding for.
Oh, man.
So, I got hurt, but I got a big fat check to replace my broken bike. And I got reimbursed for all my race entries for the season. And I came out enough ahead that I socked away some cash and I went to Europe the entire summer after I, recovered from my injuries. And then after I started working abroad in 2007, I kind of stopped caring about being an obsessive cyclist, but I'm still a huge fan of the European road and cyclocross racing scenes. Cool. I watch the Giro d'Italia, the Tour de France. I watch Paris-Nice. I watch the Vuelta a España. I watch Paris-Roubaix. I watch the Tour of Flanders, Flèche Wallonne, Liège-Bastogne-Liège. I watch all that stuff. I watch the Super Prestige Cyclocross series. And, I tend to ride a lot in June and July to escape like insanely oppressive heat when it comes to running.
Yeah.
So basically 10 months a year right now, I'm a runner, but 2 months a year, I am still a cyclist. So I have a long and intense history with cycling. And I was totally stoked when Propaganda put out a song about cycling. So all that said, we've talked about Hadron Colliders and bike racing and crashing and all kinds of stuff. But we have a super awesome guest, so we're going to dive into that. So the guest on this episode is Aaron Scott. And Aaron Scott is somebody that some of you may know who he is, and many of you may not. I'm a huge fan of Aaron's music. Aaron was the singer in the band Marathon, one of my favorite bands, as well as the singer in De La Hoya, and then his solo Attica project, which is actually my favorite project of Aaron's, is Attica, which he made in collaboration with friends. But I've known for a long time that Aaron is a huge Propaganda fan because in 2011, Attica released a split 7-inch with the band Ruiner on Vinyl Collective for volume 14 of the Under the Influence series, where he covered the State Lottery, which I have a pinkish reddish variant of that 7-inch. And the cover, which was made by Mitch Clem, is really cool. And Aaron's cover of the State Lottery is fantastic. But I've been a huge Attica and Marathon fan for years. And I think that Painting by Numbers, the first track on the Marathon LP, is one of the top 5 songs for me in 2005. And the others are likely from Ruiner by Wilhelm Scream and Potemkin City Limits by Propaganda. So Marathon was super important to me in 2005. But I reached out to Aaron a while back, and it took a bit for me to track him down because he's not really playing music anymore. But he took his time picking a tune, and he chose Hadron Collision, a fabulous choice, if I do say so myself. So, without further delay, we are going to go to my chat with Aaron Scott from Marathon, De La Hoya, and Attica, Attica. Aaron Scott, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Thanks, Greg. Really happy to be here.
We are delighted to have you. You are one of the guests that I've been just so excited to chat with on this show. For those listeners out there who don't know who you are or your work, can you introduce yourself just a little bit for the audience?
Sure. So I was a singer in a few different bands. De La Hoya, we were a band out of New York City in the late 90s. And then Marathon, we were from Central New York, and that was, early 2000s. And then after that, I did Attica, Attica for several years, which was my more or less acoustic solo project that would incorporate some friends along the way.
Fantastic. Well, those are some great records. I was actually listening to the Marathon record when I was running yesterday, and I listened to Dead Skin, Dried Blood this morning from Attica, Attica. And you've been a person whose music I've been listening to pretty much nonstop since that Marathon record with Painting by Numbers came out. And I was on Twitter earlier, and I said that I think that the Marathon record was my most played record besides Potemkin City Limits in 2005.
So that's flattering. That's also, knowing you run a propaganda podcast, that's a flattering association. Thank you.
Yeah. And if it wasn't for Potemkin City Limits, I was going to say that Painting by Numbers would have been hands down easily my favorite song of 2005. And I think that Oh Calcutta came out that year as well. Mm-hmm. So that was like a big year for music for me. But yeah, Keith and I were listening to Painting by Numbers yesterday, and we were both just like, holy moly, what a song this is. So we were stoked, man.
I'm glad you liked it.
Oh yeah. So Aaron, you are here to talk about propaganda with us, talk about music, and hang out for a little bit. And like I said, I'm delighted to have you. But let's just go ahead and start off by talking about your backstory of finding propaganda. I know that you recount this in your Attica, Attica Ruiner split 7-inch, but I'm wondering if you can tell the particular story of how you first discovered propaganda and came to realize that they were going to be a band that would matter to you in your life.
Yeah, well, I was digging deep, and I recalled something prior to my true discovery of propaganda, and that was, I was in high school in the mid-90s, and I was the type of kid who would wear plaid pants to school, and played trumpet in band class, and so I was obligated to be in a ska band, and so I was, and that kind of downplays it. I did so enthusiastically. And I was working at this independent pancake house, waiting tables in high school. And one of my classmates who also worked there, just one day I was walking past him, and he just muttered to me, "Ska sucks." And then I'm like, okay, he was always ribbing me about something. And then, but then the next time I walked past him, he goes, "Ska revival isn't cool, you stupid fucks." And I'm like, what is this guy doing to me? And he basically just one pass at a time said the entire lyrics to the song "Ska Sucks" to me. And I finally was like, what are you doing? And he's like, "Oh, haven't you heard propaganda?" And I was like, no. And so at that point, I mean, this was probably 1996 or 97. Propaganda to me was I guess they were just like a joke band, or novelty band is the word that y'all have kicked around. So anyway, I hadn't really taken their name seriously until a year later. I think it was 98. I was in Hamburg visiting my friend Michael, who has a deep knowledge of good punk music and a really awesome vinyl collection. And I saw propaganda on a shelf, and I was like, "Oh yeah, what's the deal with this band?" And he and he said, "You have to sit down and listen to this right now." And
Do you
so
remember
he
what
played,
record?
well, it was both How to Clean Everything and Let's Talk.
Nice.
So he had both of them, and he just had me listen to both of them front to back. I mean, it took less than an hour, right? Um, and he dubbed them on a tape for me, and I was so into it that I just listened to that tape for the rest of the trip. And basically, the majority of that trip was, I mean, he had to work, so I would just ride one of his bikes around town. I would get lost in town and then pull the map out and find my way back. And I listened to those records so much during that week. And I don't know if you have this experience, but basically, like a lot of records, especially from like my teens and early 20s, if I really wore them out early on, they come with like this imprinted memory, right? And so, I'll put on one of those records, and it just puts me like right back to being in this like awesome city that I had never explored before, and also learning some new ideas at the time. So those two pieces overlaid really nicely.
Yeah, that's how Supporting Cast, the LP, is for me, because I was living just outside of London when that record came out, and I got it in the mail, and I would run on these like lock and key trails around my suburb of Guildford, just outside of London, England. And so I'd be running through the forests along these little rivers, through these gorgeous paths, and getting stung by stinging nettles and things like that, and like listening to like Tertium Non Datur, and it just like sticks in my brain forever. And so I totally know what you mean, and I love that feeling when you can attach a feeling from a record to a specific time and place. And I'm wearing a No Means No shirt right now, and the same thing with me and No Means No is I have this memory of sitting in my friend's attic recording music and listening to No Means No between our breaks, and it's just one of those things that just, they're like, those certain bands that do that for you. I love those feelings.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so you got Less Talk More Rock and How to Clean Everything on these cassettes. And where did that, so this was like the late 90s. So how did your fandom develop from there? Like, do you remember like some other transformative moments early on?
Well, Today's Empires was one of the few records that I can remember anticipating, like tangibly anticipating, like
Sure.
knowing the release date and just like, I cannot wait till this comes out. And they also, I was living in New York City at the time, and they came through pretty soon afterwards. So it was all part of the same, excitement. And so, yeah, I mean, and we were also, De La Hoya was touring back then too. So we'd just like be in the van, and we were like a pretty small time DIY band. And so, we'd put on records of bands we really liked and respected. It was one thing to be like, oh, okay, we're putting on, putting on Quicksand or something like that. I mean, we respected Quicksand, but it's also like, this is like a huge band on, late night on MTV. Like, that's not what we aspired to per se. So like Propaganda had that, had both things going for them. They were musically something we aspired to, and also as far as how they carried themselves through the music industry, we thought that was a good place to be. I mean, they were still playing like club shows and stuff, but it was kind of like the highest heights we could imagine ourselves get to. So there was definitely a lot of playing Propaganda and imagining ourselves in those shoes.
Nice. What about seeing Propaganda? I only got to see them after Beeve had joined, after Potemkin came out. So that was my first time seeing them was delayed because of 9/11 when they had to cut short a US tour.
Yeah.
But do you have any stories of seeing them live that really stand out to you in any kind of way?
Well, I've only seen them live once, and that was on that Today's Empires tour.
Oh my goodness.
I have the uncanny ability of being out of town
Yeah.
when they are touring, and I've come very close to making some deeply misguided financial decisions to get back to town in time to see them live. But never pulled the trigger on that. But anyway, they were playing the Wetlands in New York City, which was just one of the smaller clubs in town, and they were playing like a double header, which I thought was a really interesting choice. They played New York City twice in the same day at the same club. And my buddy was buying tickets, and he was like, "Do you want me to get you tickets for both shows?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't need to see them twice in the same venue on the same day." And I went to the evening show, and whatever they opened up with, I instantly regretted not having gone to the afternoon show too. It was just, it's pretty rare you're excited about a band and you go see them live and it's like what you expect. When your expectations are that high. And I have to say, you know, punk bands have like, the bar is pretty low for how close they can come to executing their records live. And as a performer, that's that latitude I'm grateful for. But you know, as a fan, I've definitely gone to see some punk bands where I'm like, they were too drunk, or they just phoned it in, or like, I guess they're just not as good as the record says, or what have you, which is fun. It's all fine. And I'm sure some people have come away seeing my music feeling the same way. But that is all to say that Propagandhi just like totally fulfilled all expectations, both in execution and in vibe. And like the only thing I specifically remember from that show is Todd pulled some kid up on stage and was just like, I forget what he said, something like, "Can you give the crowd a hell yeah?" And the kid was like, "Hell yeah." And then he's like, "One more time." And he's got his arm around the kid, and the kid is just all in, just blowing out his voice, screaming "hell yeah" over and over again. And Todd just with a huge grin on his face, just "one more time." And I just thought it was the funniest thing I'd seen live, but it was just like such good-natured humor, you know. He wasn't like humiliating anybody. And Chris eventually was like, okay, let's get the show moving.
So
yeah.
So Wetlands, I've never been to Wetlands. I've been to CBGB's, the old CBGB's in New York City, and I've been to the Knitting Factory in Manhattan. Are they sort of comparable size rooms to Wetlands?
Yeah, I think the Knitting Factory has a couple different rooms.
Yeah,
it's a little, I think it's a little bigger than CBGB's.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, very, very cozy. And, you know, one of those shows where it's like, you kind of get to know the other people in the room just by the fact that there's so few people allowed in there, you know?
Right. It kind of reminds me, whenever I'm thinking about where I live in Buffalo, it kind of reminds me of like Mohawk Place in downtown Buffalo, where it's like this.
I played there.
Yeah, teeny tiny little space. I saw Spanish Love Songs there last year, and we were all like, "Hi, everybody!" Like right in there, just packed in. But it's a tiny little place, and it kind of reminds me of some of those New York City joints that I've been to, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
When were you at Mohawk? Were you there with Attica, or were you there with Marathon?
No, Attica in I don't know, 2008 or something.
Yeah, nice. So when I reached out to you ages ago about doing this, we, you know, I was throwing some ideas back and forth with you about song selection, because I make all of my guests pick songs to appear on, and you had a fairly agonizing selection process. Tell me about this dilemma that I sent you down whenever you were having such a hard time to choose your song.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just the nature of having a perfectionism streak. You know, if there's a problem in front of me, I want to get it right, even if that's an absurd like application of it. But also, you know, like like Propaganda is a band that means something to me. So like there's a lot of songs that would be songs I'd like to talk about. And it's almost like some songs were almost like too precious to me to just like, if that makes any sense. So I was really bouncing around, and I was like, at one point I was like, should I just pick Gamble, and you know, because that cover rips, and just talk about how much that cover ripped. But ultimately I landed on Hadron because it kind of like sat in the middle of all those things, And it really does resonate with me a few specific ways that not a lot of other punk songs do, because not a lot of other punk songs, like, I don't know, talk about consumerism or environmentalism in that way.
Nice. Well, before we get to the song itself, can you tell me a little bit about the role of the Failed States LP in your life? Is there like a time and place, meaning for the Failed States LP when it came out in 2012? Like, what was going on for you around that time?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In some ways, it is the Propaganda album with the least sense of like time and place for me. Um, it was at a time where I was no longer like spending my day to day with people who also listen to like the same type of music I listen to. So there just wasn't a lot of conversation around it. I certainly listened to it plenty, but I didn't have that like community surrounding the experience, which I have with a lot of records, although that's also part of like getting older, I guess. Some people don't want to talk about new music as much as they used to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have like a memory imprinting with this album, but I have enjoyed like digging back into it a little more specifically. I mean, I've listened to a few episodes of this where, you and Keith have talked pretty glowingly about Failed States and how it's darker and whatnot. And I mean, the music's great, of course, but messaging wise, it is affirming of, I don't know if my worldview is the term I would use, but like, I've been pretty pessimistic for a long time about the arc of human history. And, I think that's probably not unique in that way as far as Propaganda fans go. But I also like to maintain like a positive day-to-day experience as much as possible. And so those two pieces of me are constantly at odds. And I'm well aware that like, if you let that like pessimism out all the time, you're just like miserable to be around. And so yeah, I think there's a couple moments on the album where there's little glimmers of positivity, and like those really speak to me when presented on this bed of like, oh my God, we're so screwed,
Yeah. Well, and I love this record that we're talking about as well, Failed States. And I'm so lucky that Chris Hanna appears on our Duplicate Keys episode and Todd is on our Dark Matters episode.
Yeah.
So it's really like there's a few little nuggets that are coming together for this show regarding Failed States. And I totally know what you mean about like the positivity moments, like the ending of the record, This Universe is Love on Duplicate Keys. It really is a profound ending to such a dark journey of a record that it's like all of these things and then love. And I'm like, holy cow, you just hit me right in the heart with your humanity and your love talk. But tomorrow's episode, this will be out long before, but tomorrow's episode is Lotus Gate. So we kind of are bringing together that 1-2 punch of Lotus Gate and Duplicate Keys on our next episode. So I am like fully immersed in Failed States right now. So I love hearing your take on it. Let's get to Hadron.
Sure.
Tell me why you landed on Hadron. And I want to talk about bikes and cycling and horror stories of like bike warfare. And I want to know all of it. I want to know about touring on a bike. I want to know about everything. Tell me why you landed on Hadron.
Yeah, well, there aren't a ton of punk songs about riding bikes. I mean, it's like a little bit specific or boutique. And yet, I don't know. I mean, like, I think they kind of, the whole like bike punks thing or whatever, like they kind of go hand in hand of a certain corner of, my experience traveling, is just the like kind of simplicity of that being a form of travel. And, I didn't have, I had a band van for a little while there, but I lived in Portland without a car for almost 10 years. And I mean, it's a great place to, get around by bike and by bus. And I also was brought into a like biking tour. So basically, Attica toured by bicycle from Boston to Key West. And we ended up biking 2,400 miles over the course of the tour. Granted, we weren't bringing like full gear; it was acoustic, so we had a couple of guitars with us. And we toured from Boston and then played Fest as part of it, and then ended in Key West because that's where the ocean that's where the ocean picks up.
That's where the road runs out.
Yeah. So and as part of the tour was kind of like the fulfillment of biking as part of like my own identity is the wrong word, but like biking regularly and biking to get places was part of my personal experience of like giving a shit about the environment, basically.
Yeah.
And so, I picked this song because it resonated in all those ways, but also because when I look at that and like, it's the car that kills the punk. If you look at my life right now, it's like, oh my God, like Todd nailed it. I mean, I have 2 kids and I have the means to get them around by bike, but I have totally let myself lapse into like capitalist, I have no time culture and just throw the kids in the car. Granted, they're very little, and there is certainly a practical or pragmatic element to this too.
Yeah.
But it really feels like I've done a 180 as far as how I get around town, and that other layer of like simplicity lost. And so yeah, I mean, that's why I selected the song. I feel like there are other elements to your question here.
Yeah. Do you, so there's a few ways we could go with this.
Yeah.
So I was a cyclist for a long, long time. I raced road bikes. I raced cyclocross bikes. I still follow the Tour de France and like the European cyclocross scene, like almost obsessively. And it's just such a large part of my identity. Human beings traveling on these 2-wheeled machines, which are arguably some of the most efficient uses of human power that you can think of. And it's got such a deep resonance with everything about my life. And, you mentioned that tour that lasted 2,400 miles, and you mentioned getting around by bicycle in town almost exclusively in Portland for like a decade. And I'd imagine probably a lot of times you lived in New York City as well. Are there any like conflict stories? Because there's like a conflict in this song, right? About Todd against the cars who are in their cages on wheels, and they're like filled with rage sitting behind their steering wheels, and they have no ways of letting out their negative energy except for to take it out on this dude on the bike. Do you have any sort of experiences of like, trying to do this good thing for the world, for the planet, for the environment, and being attacked for it because you are not fitting into the box that society has created for ourselves?
Yeah. We got on our tour, we got plenty of kind of low key flack from people. I mean, it didn't seem like low key at the time when you're like 40 miles into your day and totally worn out and your knee hurts and someone throws a like, McDonald's shake at you. It's like, okay, this is the worst thing that could ever happen, but
it's fair.
Yeah. But I mean, it was all kind of like, passing, they're driving past and yelling names out the window, it's like schoolyard BS. And it's not lost on me that, I mean, we were 3 white men, like, I don't think it necessarily would have been as smooth or easy for another group of people, perhaps.
Yep.
And that's not like picking on the states we went through. I just think like everywhere that's the experience, right?
It is.
And so there's definitely a privilege element to it. But what I found more interesting was the people who were, who really had no reason to like express kindness one way or the other. They were just so fascinated by what we were doing. And there was a moment we're riding through Brooklyn. I mean, plenty of people ride their bikes in Brooklyn, but like we have all our gear with us, and we definitely look like weirdos or whatever. And in the context of it every day in Brooklyn, which is like notable. And yeah, so like a couple guys are loading up this like a work truck or something. They look like maybe they're in their 60s. And one of them was like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're riding our bikes to Florida." And he said, "Wow." And then he goes, "Me, I've been stuck in traffic my whole fucking life."
Mm-hmm.
And that just like nailed it for us.
Yep.
We wanted to, like, I mean, there's definitely like a selfishness. I don't know if it's selfishness, but like, we wanted to do it, so we did it, right? And that's part of the privilege piece, but also we wanted part of it to be like celebrating this form of getting around, which is underutilized.
Yeah. Well, and the line in the song "Cages on Wheels" and talking about
Mm-hmm.
human beings rotting in their cages on wheels.
Right.
And right now, this year during the pandemic, like I haven't sat in traffic in months.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost unfathomable to me right now to get into my car and do a 20-minute commute into the city to like go to a job and sit at a desk and wear a tie. Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost unfathomable to do that because of the ways our lives have changed. And I think this is going to have long lasting repercussions for many years to come when we think about the ways that people go to work and how people do their jobs. But something else I'm thinking about is in this conversation, like you ride a bike, I ride a bike. There are many people listening to this show who don't ride bikes. And something that, I always think about whenever I'm riding my bike is trying not to be completely in the way. And this song is about, I'm going to clog up your lane. And that is the exact opposite to how I actually approach riding a bike whenever I'm in a city. Like I am trying to be, as small as possible because I don't want people to get enraged with me. And if they see me riding a bike, I want for them to be able to get around me so that they don't associate cyclists with them becoming enraged, because maybe they don't take it out on me, but maybe down the road, another person does that. And they're like, these sons of bitches on bikes are always in my way. And then boom. And I think about that all the time, how if I'm being a dick on my bike, how maybe in a way that I don't need to be, if I'm just doing it just because I feel like it and I don't have to, like, what if somebody else pays the price for me doing that on that one day, And it's just, I try to think about it a lot because I've ridden my bike so many thousands of miles over the years, and it really, it sticks with me. And, I also want the listener to consider the fact that next time they drive past a person on a bike, it might be you. It might be me. You know what I mean? Like, what if a listener to this podcast is driving around in Buffalo, New York, and somebody is in the road and it's me, and like they get into an accident and they realize like, and I'm like, oh, I'm this guy. And what if you get into an altercation with somebody on a bike that and it turns out that you actually really like that person.
Sure.
That's just something that I think about. Like whenever somebody's like listening to this, like if you see somebody on a bike, like it might be somebody that you actually would like in real life. We're not evil.
Right. Well, I think that speaks to how confident we are that car culture permeates even amongst, listeners of your podcast and beyond. And don't get me wrong, I own a car. Like,
so do I.
As I have admitted on this podcast, I drive it. But I think what I take from this song is more the me against the world, or me against this culture approach. And, when Todd says, there's not much I need to ride a single speed, it's really about, what I take from that is the minimalism of it and just stripping everything down to like point A to point B. This is what I need. I don't need a bunch of other stuff. Yes, it's 40 degrees or below outside. I just need to get where I'm going. And if I get in somebody's way, that's an act of interruption of this culture rather than like a, individuals messing with each other. And so, when I think of this song, I think of the cars as like this blob, cultural blob, you know, and Todd's getting in the way of that and enjoying that moment. Even though, yeah, I mean, if we dig real deep in it, yeah, there's definitely a safety issue with just like getting in front of cars.
Did you ever listen to the Broadways, that band on Asian Man Records?
Mm.
Like there's that first song on that record where Dan Hanaway's singing. He's like, I drove to my stupid job today, got stopped at an intersection. And it's just like about this entire life of just sitting in your car. And I can't help but like think about all these things, like how we spend our minutes of our day. And I tell you what, man, it is so much more empowering to spend your time on a bike riding across town, feeling wind in your face and feeling that surge of energy in your body, as opposed to sitting in your car and your back just gets stiffer and your knees get stiffer and you get out of your car and you got to stretch it all out and you got to go into your job. But when I've ridden my bike to work in the past, I get there and I am just coursing with energy, and I'm a teacher and I'm like, hey kids, and like I beat them over the head with energy, because I am so energized by how I chose to start my day, as opposed to driving in and being all hunched over behind the wheel, you know?
Totally. And it's telling how people react to you showing up to a workplace on a bike.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one thing if you show up at your vegan restaurant you work at, which are places I've worked at before, and you know, everybody rides a bike to work or whatever, but like, you know, I've worked places where someone says, you ride your bike to work, and then their next thing they say is like, oh, what, do you have a DUI? Because the only reason you'd be riding your bike is because you're not allowed to drive a car, or because you don't have enough money to own a car or something like that. You know, people ride the bus, like there's a lot of classism around, you know, people who use public transit, even though I've used that religiously as well, sometimes in combination with my bike. And so I think it's just like non-car modes of transportation are just widely derided, and part of it is bigger than just cars. It's bigger than just the convenience of it, because the convenience is that symptom of consumer culture and capitalism. You know, I've seen a lot of people talk during the pandemic about, you know, like how the drive to be as productive as we were outside of the pandemic is like just a symptom of capitalism. And you know, even the idea that we'd be even more productive because now, like, look, we're saving time on commuting or whatever. And so basically it all, you can track all of these miniature interactions upwards towards how we allocate our time, and that, you know, we're basically worker bees.
What do you think of the Hadron musical performance, as somebody who has played in bands before, who plays instruments? Like, what do you think about the actual performance of the tune between Jordan, Chris, Todd, and David on this track?
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, I'm not a competent musician in even the same galaxy as these guys. So like, for me to offer my commentary on it is is maybe foolish. But I will say this song sounds the way it feels to ride your bike in intense weather, or you know, in like a sketchy situation. Like when I first moved to New York, I bought a BMX bike and I would ride it down Broadway, like 4 lanes going the same direction in between city buses. Terrible idea. I'm not advocating for this whatsoever, but like the feeling of doing that, it was so exhilarating. And I'm just, you know, that the sound of that in my head is the sound of Todd just going, ah, like in the middle of the song. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the way it ends, it's like you pull up at wherever you were going and shake the rain off or the cold off, and you know, laugh to yourself a little bit. I mean, the whole song just embodies that feeling to me. Nice. And you know, musically, it sounds like they're barely hanging on to the beat, but I bet if you took out a metronome and isolated any of the tracks, it'd sound totally right on. It feels intentional to me, that it's just like, we're just going at breakneck speed and we're not going to stop till we get to the end of the song.
Awesome. So Aaron, you've mentioned a few times earlier that propaganda matters a lot to you.
Mhm.
Can you just sort of like sum up as we move into the end of our discussion on Hadron Collision, like what you love about propaganda and why you're grateful for their music as a fan of music and art yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have talked about this, or this is a common theme when I listen to other episodes of your podcast. But like, the music I was listening to in the 90s was like in the same ballpark as Propagandhi, but they were really the only band that was that I was listening to that was speaking to like the deeper pieces of why things are the way they are. A lot of bands would be political and would talk generally about like how you can't trust the government or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you look at like the songs on Let's Talk or on Today's Empires, they're getting more deeply into like uh, questions of sexuality, for example. And don't get me wrong, plenty of bands were talking about that in their lyrics. I just wasn't listening to them.
Sure.
I admittedly was like pretty pretty honed in on music written by white men, and so of that demographic, this is really the only band that was talking about that stuff. And so they were really key in providing that door to a much more eclectic music overall, and also just broader perspectives, and realize, oh, well, part of it is like realizing, well, maybe I shouldn't just listen to bands to find out how the world works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, that's piece number one. But piece number two for me is that they continue to coincidentally develop as a band parallel to my developing music taste. And so like, Victory Lap came out, and Adventures in Psychosis, like I still like cry every
Same.
time I listen to that song. And if I wasn't a parent, if I heard that in 1998,
Yep. Snooze
I would
fest.
not have that. I would not have that reaction. And
Yeah.
instead, it's like this song is like the culmination of like all of their albums. And so, really, I mean, they have. I can't think of a single other band that's as long running as them that has kept me engaged in music and in their music. So yeah.
I love it. Well, Aaron, this has been a really wonderful conversation about Hadron Collision, failed states, riding bikes, getting crazy. Love it. We are so grateful to you for coming on the podcast. And I'm so grateful to you for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Appreciate it.
So that was my chat with Aaron from Marathon, De La Hoya, and Attica. I am super pumped. Aaron, thank you so much for being here, for hanging out with me, for talking about music and propaganda and Hadron and everything. A real pleasure. Keith, should we start off this episode? We're 2 hours into this thing probably at this point. But what do you think about starting with the music for this one?
I like that idea. We'll take a little bit of break from the science and bike riding.
Yeah. So here we have a 4/4 banger, and this is one of 4 Todd songs on Failed States, or one of 5 if you count the bonus track, The Day You Hate Yourself from the deluxe edition. And I got to thinking about this style of Todd song, and many people on Twitter noticed this weekend that I did a Kowalski banger playlist on Spotify. I left off the songs where Chris and Todd share vocals equally for the most part. New Homes for Idle Hands is on there though. But I left off the more experimental Todd songs like Cut Into the Earth and stuff like that. So my Kowalski Rager playlist is Super Bowl Patriot, The Days You Hate Yourself, New Homes for Idle Hands, This Is Your Life, Impending Halfhead, Fuck the Border, Hadron Collision, Incalculable Effects, Rattan Cane, and Night Letters. So it's like 10 tracks in 18 minutes. And I was like, yup, that is totally right on. And I also realized that we haven't done a fast Todd song in this vein yet. If you look
Yeah.
back at all the ones we've done, they've been like Cut into the Earth, Negredo, When All Your Fears Collide, Bringer of Greater Things, Dark Matters. So it's been a very dark collection of songs that we've done, but we haven't done any of these super fast types that Todd is so well known for. So it's awesome to get to a fun tune. And I think that this is probably the most fun Todd song in his entire recording career with Propagandy. You know what I mean? It's like a Municipal Waste-esque party song of Propagandy.
Oh, absolutely. And the bends with the wah pedal in the beginning.
Yeah.
In the first 4 seconds cement that it's going to be a fun song. It cements the tone. And what's to follow is going to be a little bit out of control, maybe not as dire as other Propagandy songs, but that it still has a lot to say, but just has way more fun saying it.
Yeah, and I also love those wah pedal bends to kick off the tune. But dude, you want to know what's so crazy? For all the years I've been listening to this album, I've only been paying attention to the wow, 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 wow in the intro. I never paid attention to what Beeve was doing behind the wah. You know what I mean? So Chris is doing that huge string bend opening, and the Beeve is playing underneath him. And the Beeve is playing the full speed riff underneath the string bends. He is wailing underneath those string bends. And I've never noticed that. He's playing the full speed riff right in the first measure. So the reason I noticed this is because I was watching a live version of this song in April of 2012 before the album came out. And I was like, whoa, why is Beeve just shredding in the first 2 seconds of the song when Chris is doing the wow, 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 wow? And he's already playing the full speed riff that Todd sings over when the music comes in. And I was like, no, surely he doesn't play the second guitar that fast on the record, right? But I listened, and sure enough, Beeve is playing the riff full speed. He hits 6 chords in the first measure.
I didn't even notice this. I didn't notice.
Dude, unbelievable. So if anybody else out there is listening and you didn't notice that Beeve plays 6 chords in the first measure while Chris is doing those string bends, you really need to go and pay attention to that second guitar right when the song starts, because I have never thought about that. I always just thought it was the string bends and like the cymbals, like bow, 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 bow.
I just opened the tab book and lo and behold, there it is.
6 chords in the first measure, dude. Unbelievable. I totally couldn't believe it. Do you have any more thoughts on the guitar in Hadron?
Yeah, I think it continues to take a departure away from Todd's earlier chaotic songs like Fuck the Border and Ordinary People. The guitars here retain that driving intensity that he's known for, but they're just not as frantic, which I appreciate. That main riff is super thrashy. It's almost like a crossover hardcore band with just driving energy and power that pummels the listener, but it's still melodic and it's still catchy, especially after the gang vocals yell, Hadron Collision. What's iconic to me is that I can hear this style of guitar from traditional heavy metal and thrash songs that talk all about driving and automobiles and, the white knuckle speed and Metallica's Motor Breath, Riot's road racing, Razor's Death Race, and high speed metal. I had like a whole week of listening to metal songs all about driving fast. Anthrax's Death Rider, Exciters, Live Fast, Die Young, 502 by Megadeth, Freewheel, Burning by Judas Priest, and Black Sabbath's Thrashed. And my favorite examples of this are Devil Gate Ride by the Swedish death thrash band The Crown. If you can, pause this and pull up the song and just listen to like the 30-second mark, or the song Livewire by the band Zeke.
Oh, dude, that's so good.
Opening. Like, tell me Hadron Collision wouldn't fit on a mixtape with a crude drawing of an Ed Roth style Rat Fink drawing with some cartoonishly over the top drag racing car on it. It really fits in with like that thrashy style, and it feels and sounds like a pedal to the metal thrash song. So even the solo, I think, feels like early thrash. It's fast and shreddy. It's not the cleanest, it's not the most virtuoso, which I guarantee is intentional, but it adds to that high octane feel of the song, accenting speed and dexterity, not necessarily technicality and perfection. It's more of a solo with a purpose. And I love that the song turns that niche metal tradition of, driving songs about driving fast on its head, whether it's intentional or not, since people think, well, I need to get somewhere fast and a bike would be too slow. Well, from the perspective of the person on the bike, it's exhilarating, it's unpredictable, it's fast moving, and the music 100% reflects that experience.
Yeah, and I was so pumped when you told me about Livewire by Zeke, because I think I listened to that song like 10 times yesterday.
It's super good.
Oh, it's wonderful. And, I had a few other thoughts about this song too, with regards to crossover thrash. And, when I was super young, I was all about like the kick drum style that you can hear like in those Ryan Green 1990s Fat Records albums, with that really fast, like you can hear on the first track of Making Friends by No Use for a Name. And like I gauged everything about the quality of a record based on the kick drum for a long time. Like, I don't know why, but I was obsessed with like how fast can this person play a kick drum. But, now I see drums a lot differently, and I've started looking at the way that Jord has been playing on this song, and he doesn't overplay his kick drum here, and like instead utilizes a more thrash oriented kick that you can hear if you listen to like Firing Squad by Power Trip or Kicked in the Teeth record by Zeke. And, I was thinking about that as well, a little more along the lines of the guitar. Speaking of Power Trip, if this song had a different guitar tone, then I think it would be talked about far more as a crossover thrash party banger.
Yeah.
I think that like if you listen to like the guitar tone on a Power Trip record and you listened and then you put that guitar tone on this song, that those worlds would be far more recognized as being like at one than I think that they are, because like this is so much more into that crossover world and so much stuff out there. And like as far as like the drums a little more goes, I really like what Jord does a lot throughout the song. I love the ride bell under There's Not Much I Need. I love how he's got that ride bell going. And I love the transition rolls, and I love the hi-hat hits leading into the roar before the solo. It's like, ah! And, I love the drum roll going into, and I might be trapped in a world going backwards, like that drum roll leading into that part. It's just so cool how much stuff gets crammed into this song. And like, there's a part just after the drum and bass section where the vocals are, I'll leave you with the greed to wallow in your shit till you can't breathe. It leads back into the Hadron Collision chorus section, but they hit that chorus section twice in the song. The first one is Hadron Collision, and the second one is Head On Collision. So they have these two chorus parts, but the drums are totally different than the first time through on the second chorus section. When he's singing the vocal, I'm ripping through a cloud of exhaust, it's just so creative how different the drums are in the Hadron Collision chorus compared to the Head On Collision chorus. I mean, because Jord could have easily just repeated his double time first chorus style of performance, but he changed it up entirely on his playthrough of the second chorus. And I was like, hats off, Jord. So,
That's awesome.
So freaking rad. It was just like blowing me away. The vocal performance, you kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. Do you have any thoughts on the vocal performance specifically within this song?
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize also that we hadn't really done one of Todd's more hardcore songs, and his vocals here are just more controlled.
Yeah.
And then I think of, what he had done previously. So it sounds more like Rattan Kane, where he's more abrasive than on tracks like Cognitive Suicide, but more interpretable than on songs that I mentioned before, like Ordinary People. So
Right.
I really like this hardcore scream, but it's just far more controlled. It's more audible. It's more decipherable. And I also love the gang vocals. They're huge, just like on I'm a Rifle. And the part of me wishes that they did this more, like the early Comeback Kid records and the Two With Honor albums that have just over the top gang vocals are personal favorites of mine. But it's probably good that it's just, this song or certain songs, because I can't really imagine it too many other places in their discography. But it just lends so much energy and enthusiasm. I think especially at that 53-second mark, there's like almost like a wild, the scream is just incoherent. It's just, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Chris's backing vocals really stand out too.
So good.
Singing I Might Be Trapped in a World going backwards. And then again at the end of the song, he backs up Todd, but it's on every other line.
I loved that.
Like that. Yeah. And I didn't notice that until this week.
Yeah. I love the fact that this is like one of Todd's more hardcore ones, like Super Bowl Patriot. But it's like Todd found a reasonable middle ground on vocal delivery between the heavy hitters, because this is post supporting cast. And I know that Todd had a lot of like vocal cord problems for a couple of years there where he wasn't really singing anything live at all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Todd figured out like the way that works best for him to have the bangers, but to not set himself up to blow himself out. You know what I mean? Like he found like a sustainable way to sing tunes. So he almost kind of sings this one like Life at Disconnect or Dark Matters, like the intensity level, because it's not like Super Bowl Patriot. If you listen to Super Bowl Patriot from Potemkin City Limits, I mean, it's way just goes as hard as he can. And, I think the vocal cord scarce of supporting cast made him rethink how he delivers his lines on these fast ones. And you can sense a shift in the feel of the performance compared to the older fast ones. And, if you think how there aren't any songs like this from Todd on Victory Lap, it's really intriguing to see like his progressions over the years. But I love the roar after the hi-hat hits into the solo. It's so great. And in the Sheet Happens book, it does say roar in the text, which is so cool. But interestingly, the roars on the outro to Rattan Kane, the track before this, is in my top favorite moments of the entire record.
Yeah.
Where it's oh,
yeah.
Da 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 da. And I just love the roars that he's got on these back-to-back songs of Rattan Kane and Hadron Collision. Also, you mentioned the gang vocals. Huge shout out to the Hadron backing vocal choir, Dee Dee McCoggan, Jen Wilson, and Lisa Moore from the Propagandy Inner Circle. So huge, awesome backing gang vocals. Like you said, like I'm a Rifle or War on Women backed up. Yeah, so fantastic. Any more thoughts on the music, or should we dive into some of these lyrics?
Yeah, let's start to talk about the lyrics, Rick.
So I have some stuff to talk about with regards to bicycle safety before we dive into these lyrics.
Yeah.
So first, so I'm going to go on some tangents here, and I apologize, but I've been a cyclist in every conceivable situation that you can possibly think of. I've ridden my bike tens of thousands of miles. That's not even an exaggeration. And I've been in some dicey situations. So infrastructure in the US is not designed to safely accommodate people on bicycles. Conflicts between cyclists and others date back to horse-drawn carriage times in the 1880s, when bicycle, trendiness and accessibility started taking off. So horse-drawn carriage drivers were super pissed at cyclists a lot, and the laws were super fuzzy in the 1880s and 1890s. But cycling rocks. So the fight for legal rights started all the way back then. And the first cycling law was passed in the New York State Legislature in 1887, stating that cyclists are carriages and were guaranteed the same rights of the roadway. So that fight lasted for a while, but let me be very clear. In every state in the United States, the law states that bicycles are entitled to occupy a reasonable amount of a lane. Some states have varying policies on bicycles on sidewalks, but they are called sidewalks, not side rides, for a reason. So picture a scenario for a second about riding bikes on sidewalks and why it's a bad idea. Imagine someone's granny is walking out of the pancake house on Sunday morning as you're riding your bike down the sidewalk. Your phone dings, you flinch, granny steps out of the pancake house, you smoke her with your bike, granny breaks her arm, everybody hates your guts, right? You are legally allowed to ride on the road. And if you ride on the road, you're not going to smoke granny coming out of the pancake house onto the sidewalk where she doesn't expect you to be. So another thing that really irritates me is when I see people riding against traffic.
Yeah.
It is essential if you are on a bike that you ride with traffic, not against traffic. Runners run against traffic. Cyclists ride with traffic. Drivers on cross streets do not expect you to be coming from the direction you're coming from if you ride against traffic. So do a little experiment for yourself. Next time you stop at a stop sign at a cross street that does not have a stop, a four-way stop, think about which way you will automatically look. You're going to look left, most likely to see if anybody is in your lane. So if you're in your car and you pull up to a stop sign, you're going to look left to see if anybody is driving in your lane, right? And if you can turn right because nobody is coming from your left, you're not going to look right because cars won't be driving towards you in your lane. So, however, if an unexpected cyclist is riding against traffic, they will be coming from your right and you'll plow right into them. So if you're a person riding a bike against traffic, you are putting yourself in incredible danger because cars do not expect you to be coming from that direction. So that's my rant on cycling safety in American cities.
Well, as an experienced cyclist, Greg, what would you say then for some real quick etiquette tips for drivers then if cyclists are on the road?
So one of the things that is really unfortunate about people in cars is that cars have all the power. People on bikes have no power. If you're behind the wheel of a car, you're driving somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 pound pieces of metal, and you have all of the power in a situation, whereas a person on a bike is literally skin and bones on top of a piece of metal riding down the road at 12 to 15 miles an hour. So people in cars have all of the power in the situation, and people on bikes are the vulnerable ones. Okay. We could talk about death. Cycling is dangerous. In the US, things are trending in the wrong direction, safety-wise. 2010 was the lowest annual cycling deaths in decades, with 618 deaths in the USA in 2010, but it's gotten worse every year since then. And in 2018, 857 Americans were killed riding bikes, which is a 37% increase in 8 years. But reasons that are cited for people dying more is that, way bigger vehicles, because of our gas guzzler obsession. And what people don't think about is that an SUV traveling at 30 miles an hour brings about 35% more force to a collision than a Toyota Camry, because the SUV is about 1,200 pounds heavier than a Camry. So trucks and SUVs also have super poor braking ability. And, on top of that, folks who get the most DUIs in the U.S. drive Dodge Rams, hilariously.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, totally.
Oh, my gosh.
And, we're all on our phones while we drive. One study looked at 180 billion miles of driver data, showing that 88% of trips by US drivers involve smartphone use, with an average of 3.5 minutes per hour. So if we drive for an hour as a nation, we're on our phone 3.5 minutes in that hour. So research by Volvo showed that 60% of drivers admit to regularly texting while in motion. A car going 50 miles an hour travels 220 feet in 3 seconds. So picture somebody on a bike and you see that person way up the road and you get a text and you open up your phone. In like just a few seconds, you've traveled 220 feet at 50 miles an hour. And then all of a sudden that cyclist is like right on top of your hood, so it's very dangerous. Glancing away from the road for 2 seconds or more increases the risk of crash, sometimes up to 24-fold, according to like Oregon State study. And so we drive a ton in the US, and American drivers clock 288 billion miles on the road in 2019, which was, a 35% increase compared to 2010 when we drove 212 billion miles. Billion miles.
Oh my gosh.
So think about all the people. We sit in traffic. That's a lot of pissed off people sitting in traffic, sitting on their phones, frustrated, late for work, in traffic, ready to pop off at a cyclist who just so happens to be exercising their right at the wrong place in the wrong time. So we have this culture that it enrages people who are inside these metal boxes with tons of horsepower and tons of distractions. And if you're sitting in traffic, you're going to pull out the phone and you're going to look at it as a way to kill your boredom. And that's when people die, So I really, really, really want to encourage people to think about what they're doing when they're behind the wheel of these gigantic vehicles that we have. I mean, because really drivers have all the power.
Well, Greg, those first couple lines, I'm going to skip a few and we can come back to, but where it says blaze through traffic, burn the red, push my luck, that gives me anxiety. I barely like driving in the city. So the thought of riding a bike through Chicago makes my shoulders hunch and it makes me clench my jaw. So I admire and I envy the dedication that people commit themselves to bike, to drive less, or to be car free. It's a commitment. And I admit now, I know it's a commitment that I'll never take on. But if I did, I'm not confident in myself enough or in others to weave through traffic as I visualize here, pushing my luck. I mean, that adrenaline rush sounds about as appealing to me as mountain climbing.
And what's really interesting about that line, blaze through traffic, burn the red, push my luck, that's not something that I'm interested in. You know what I mean? And I understand what Todd's going for here in that line because it's funny and it's, it's like a thrill. It's a thrilling line. But I'm not in agreement with Todd on this tune because no. I am the most boring law-abiding cyclist ever. If I run red lights or stoplights on my bike, I will just make enemies. Someone will see me run a red light or a stop sign, and then the driver or the pedestrian who sees me behaving that way will just say, there go those jerk cyclists again. They want to be treated like cars, but they can't bother to follow the rules. So I literally, on my bike, sit at red lights. I stop at stop signs. I don't ride with other people on bikes anymore because I found on group rides that I was the only one stopping at red lights. And I was like, nope, not doing it. Not interested. I don't want to be a part of that because all it does is it just makes people hate people on bikes. One time in 2003, I even got pulled over on my bike by a cop in Clayton, Missouri, on a road called Geyer Road in St. Louis for running a stop sign in the middle of a super long hill. So I was riding up this hill, which is like a mile long on Geyer Road. And there's a stop sign right in the middle of this hill, right? And if you stop at the stop sign on a hill, getting going again on a bicycle is not easy. So I ran the stop sign and I got pulled over and I got points on my driver's license for that ticket running a stop sign on my bicycle. And I'm not even joking. I had to like pay a fine and like mail in a ticket and plead guilty and all kinds of stuff. It sucked. So like when you see people in cars running stop signs in your neighborhood, that's how every driver and pedestrian sees people on bikes if they're running stop signs or lights also. Like I hate drivers who run stop signs in my neighborhood, but I've decided on my bike and in my car that I'm going to model good habits to my 7-year-old. Of being calm behind the wheel. And my 7-year-old sees me go off on my bike rides in the summer. She insists on coming to the gate and waving at me as I ride away on my bike for like a 30 or 40 mile bike ride. And so if I think about burning reds and pushing my luck, I am betraying that little child who waved at me to go on my bike ride and trusted me to come back safe. So I'm not a super big fan of the burn through traffic, burn the red, push my luck line, because I feel like it's like a betrayal to my kid. And I take it super seriously.
Well, I skipped ride fucking free 40 below.
Oh, I got some words about that.
Yeah. What do you think?
Have you ever felt minus 40 temperatures, like for real?
There were a few times when I lived in Ukraine that the thermometer outside my kitchen read negative 40. I don't know how accurate it was. I do remember going outside and it felt like my nostrils and the surfaces of my eyes instantly crystallized. And I was outside for just a few moments, but that was by far the coldest temperature, where people, of course, they don't talk about wind chill there. Right. That's not a thing. It's just cold. So when we in the Midwest, we like to brag about how cold it is. Well, that's what the wind chill added. They had none of that there. It was just like whatever the actual temperature was.
Yeah. So I lived in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is super crazy cold, just like Winnipeg. So I know exactly the temperatures that Todd is singing about on this first line. And, you know, we have listeners in many countries, and where one lives would dictate how you hear this particular lyric. So if you grew up in the US, 40 below, you're thinking in your Fahrenheit terms. If you grew up elsewhere in the world that has a civilized temperature measurement system of Celsius, because Celsius makes sense and Fahrenheit doesn't. Think about it. 0 is freezing, 100 is boiling. What's more logical and rational than that? So Fahrenheit is totally stupid, and it's on the list of things that embarrass me about the United States. But I digress. Being an American abroad, living in the UK or Canada, and having to learn a new temperature system in your 20s is embarrassing. You know, imagine being 27 years old and seeing the high temperature is 15 degrees on the news in the morning and not knowing if you need to wear a jacket or not. You know what I mean? That was my life.
I had a spreadsheet that I wrote out and put on my kitchen window next to my thermometer because I couldn't look at it and understand what it meant.
So anyway, what's super crazy about this minus 40 line is that minus 40 is the exact temperature where Celsius and Fahrenheit intersect.
Right.
Minus 40 Fahrenheit is precisely minus 40 Celsius also. So it doesn't matter which temperature system you think in, it's the same. So 40 below, everybody, it's minus 40 for everybody. But I was riding my bike in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan a lot in the winters of 2009, 2010, 2011. And oh boy, it is cold. I lived several blocks from a place called Amigo's Cantina, and I would go there for shows. I saw No Means No there one time, among many shows, but I would ride my bike back to my house after shows at like 1 o'clock in the morning, a little, maybe with a beer or two in the system to warm me up a little bit. But one night I was leaving a show after Amigos, and I was riding, and all of a sudden I had the most stabbing pain in my eye ever. And my contact lens froze in my eye, like froze completely solid.
Yeah.
So I rode, and I had to pull this thing out of I had to take off my mitts, right? Minus 40. And I had to take off my mitten. Horrible. And pull my contact lens out, and it broke in my fingers. And then I had to put my mitt back on, and then I kept riding, and I had one eye shut so that my one eye with my contact in is like the clear vision of what I would see. And then 2 blocks later, my other contact lens froze. So I had to pull off my mitten again, and I had to pull the frozen contact lens out again. It broke in my fingers. And then I had to walk and push my bike the rest of the way home. Fortunately, it was only a few more blocks, but I wasn't, I was too paranoid to ride without being able to clearly see the icy patches. But dude, my contact lens froze against my eyeball, and it was like minus 45 outside, and it was scary. But I have a thought about the next lines. So there's 2 lines in here. It's the car that kills the punk. And that line fits super well to me with in their cages on wheels, they fucking rot. Because both of those lines are super true. And Aaron and I talked about this, the truth of the car that kills the punk. Because, you know, it's so true, man. Like shoving ourselves into metal boxes and sticking us on the highway to wait in traffic for 40 years of our lives so we can sit in cubicles is so soul crushing that even the most idealistic young punk rocker would have their spirit crushed after a while. But I also love that the car that kills the punk might be a line of homage to No Means No's The Hawk Killed the Punk from the All Roads Lead to Ausfart LP from No Means No, which is super cool. But, you know, on days I ride to work, when I used to go to work back in the day, my mood is always so much better when I use an active form of transportation. But, you know, unfortunately, the exurban pushes out of into the far reaches of our metropolis living makes active living via commuting just so incredibly hard, and it crushes the punk, man.
Well, I'm so thankful that I don't have a commute with that line in their cages, they rot. Because obviously, one, to limit my travel, the money that I get to save on gas, but even more and selfishly, to not have to just sit in a car for hours a day. I love living where I work, and I don't know anyone who doesn't live in a city who actually can and walks to work. And something else that I found out recently, that if you added up the space of all of the parking spots, parking lots in the US, if you combine them all, it's about the size of West Virginia. So we've lost that much land just for places to put our cars. And that kind of boggles my mind. And I want to jump back to that. There's not much I need. I really love the 2 ideas that converge on this song, that reducing our dependence on fossil fuels by riding a bike and rejecting consumerism and materialism. There's just this minimalist approach to riding in an incredibly harsh climate. I mean, I can't think of any place more where you would maybe need the best gear around. It's like, no, I just got a simple bike, a hat and some gloves. And I'm sure I probably look ridiculous on my $100 bike to the people who are all geared out with bikes that cost several thousands of dollars. And I mean, I get the sense of like elitism sometimes, and right. And I mean, I'm very much an outsider. So this is maybe a very obvious statement, but I pick that up. And even in a place that is not accommodating to pedestrians, Northwest Indiana is not overrun with cyclists. I still notice that. So I love that the reason for riding a bike here in the song is not, you know, just about exercise or breaking some record or following some trend. It's an extension of Todd's radical politics. And I want to jump back to the Large Hadron Collider for a moment, because, well, if you remember that particles, that it accelerates particles close to the speed of light. And it's important to note that anything with mass can never reach the speed of light, which is expressed in Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So basically energy and mass are interchangeable. And the fastest speed achieved by humans is 99.9999991% of the speed of light for a group of photons. This achieved by the Large Hadron Collider. So getting these subatomic particles so close to the speed of light requires more energy from the electric power grid than is consumed by an entire city. And special relativity also tells us that the closer an object gets to the speed of light, the more energy it takes to get the object one increment faster. So as the object gets closer and closer to the speed of light, the amount of energy it needs in order to go faster, it spikes up rapidly, and it takes an infinite amount of energy to accelerate an object with mass to exactly the speed of light in a vacuum, which of course is not impossible. So I hear Todd saying that on his bike, he's able to create the same amount of energy just by pedaling. And in doing so, everything else slows down. So to keep it sciencey for a second, I visualize this as Todd on his bike, doing his thing, but everything else has slowed down around him. So Einstein's special relativity theory proves that the rate in which time passes depend on how fast you're moving and how fast you're accelerating. So time passes more slowly the faster you're traveling. So as the observers, you and I, if we were on the streets of Winnipeg, if Todd were traveling close to the speed of light, his image would be compressed and he would turn blue as he approaches and red as he receded, as he went away from us. And he'd take on a funhouse mirror effect that would not only make him look tall and stretched out and skinny, he would actually be taller and stretched out and skinnier. And from his perspective, everything that he would see would be squeezed into a tunnel ahead of him, and time would slow down. So Todd would experience less time and he'd age more slowly than the people that he is traveling past. So, for example, like let's say at 99.99% of the speed of light, if someone were able to travel that fast, like in the Large Hadron Collider, if he did that, if he was on his bike for that fast for an hour, that means he would experience an hour, but the rest of us would experience 7 hours if we were observing him.
Jeez Louise. That's some weird stuff, man. That's so crazy.
Time dilation.
It's also speaking to the minimalism, the simplified life as well. And there's not much I need. I ride a single speed is really cool because like minimalism, is a huge trend these days with people getting rid of their possessions in order to live clutter-free lives. So everything you just said is like so far beyond me. Like it's wild. But like I also see that he's trying to simplify life as well. And my favorite thing about single speeds and fixies is that there's almost nothing to break. There's no derailleurs, there's no gear shifters. It's just like the bare minimum of what you need in order to have this experience on the bike as well. It's so cool. Oh my gosh. Well,
so the next line is, I might be trapped in a world going backwards, but nothing's in vain. Right now, I'm happy just to clog up your lane. And this song just nails that feeling of careening toward disaster. Our refusal to address the cliff that we're barreling toward at an increasingly faster rate, fueled on, of course, by fossil fuels. And a bike is no longer a means of transportation simply. It's an act of resistance and an attempt to mitigate the damages wrought by the fossil fuel industry, a refusal to take part in what is threatening all of us.
Yeah, and I've made no secret on this show about just how disastrous I feel the path we are on actually is. And I deeply empathize with Todd on that line in this song. And, in a perfect world, I would be able to ride my bike everywhere free from fear. But, I feel like I could live in a world where we didn't need 5,000-pound pickups with insanely powerful Hemi engines that are used to tailgate and terrorize everyone who are just trying to drive like normal people. What's so scary to me about the trend of massively increasing sizes of trucks with massively increasing sizes of horsepower and weight is that people in trucks are now the people that are driving the most recklessly on the road. If you used to think about our childhood, like in the 90s, people who were like, driving little BMWs and convertibles and things like that were the people cops were looking for. But now I feel like they should be looking for people in trucks, because I feel like every time I get tailgated or terrorized on the road, it is by a person, always male, in a gigantic truck. And so, even though I know Todd is singing this line to inject some humor into the situation, right now I'm happy just to clog up your lane. I can't help but think of people on bikes who die or are run over when they clog up the lane of the wrong person. You know what I mean? Like, people in vehicles, like I said earlier, have power. People on bikes have no power. And I'm just imagining a guy who rides the bike to like his agriculture job or his gas station job, or is riding home at the end of a shift at work. And this person is like riding, they're exhausted, they're going too slowly, and some freakazoid in a Dodge Ram plows into them in a state of hysterics. And like, when I ride bikes, I find no joy in clogging up lanes, because it just teaches people in cars who frankly will never care about cyclists at all, no matter how much they're educated. Like, they will never care about people on bikes. Like, they just won't. That, if I'm clogging up lanes in an attempt to make a point, that people on bikes, they'll just see people on bikes as obstacles instead of possible collaborators for a better world. And I constantly am hoping to model behavior on a bicycle that will help people in cars be like, oh, look at that person on that bike sitting at that stoplight, obeying the law. You know what I mean? Like, so I understand the humor about clogging up lanes and things like that in the song, but I just disagree.
Yeah.
What did you think about, did you have any thoughts on a head-on collision, a species that's lost all control will learn by extinction, and we didn't need all the shit we've been sold?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is a book I mentioned in another episode by Ronald Wright. And it addresses the myth of progress and how we've been sold the idea that technology and our current culture and way that we're living is because it's more technologically advanced than civilizations in the past. It's therefore superior, even though we are so out of sync with the biosphere, with the natural world, with the planet around us, that I think that is a clear cause of that, of course, are just our individual actions. And every year at school, when we have Earth Day and we have like these really banal, meaningless Earth Day lessons that are pumped out to everyone, or a comment in the intercom, it's always about picking up a piece of plastic or recycling something, rather than looking at the actual ways that our individual actions worsen the planet and the air that we breathe, the water we drink, and the soil that nourishes life, our food. So we're out of touch in terms of our own actions. And I appreciate and I value Todd's ability to call that out, and not just to call that out, but to be vocal about what he's doing to try to limit that.
Yeah. And this line really talks to me about, it goes right to the heart of capitalism run amok as well.
Yeah.
The shit we've been sold. Americans owe $1.2 trillion in automobile debt alone.
Unbelievable.
The average American is $90,400 in debt. However, drivers are keeping their cars longer than ever, probably because an average new car right now is $35,000. The average age of all cars on the road is over 11 years right now, which is up from 8 years in 1995. So people are keeping their cars a lot longer now. My car is actually 12 years old.
Mine's 20.
And it's paid off. Motorists who buy a brand new car typically keep it about 6 years, up from about 4 years in 2006. So cars today we're driving them into the ground a lot more than we were a while ago. There's a give and take there. There's terrible things about owning vehicles, about the degradation of the planet. But the fact that we're keeping them a lot longer instead of trading them in needlessly. So I guess there's a silver lining in there somewhere. Maybe not. Maybe I'm injecting a silver lining whatever. But we've been sold so much, $1.2 trillion in auto debt. Dude, that blew me away. But then there's the line that says we might be headed for the brink of disaster. So remember, kiddies, bicycles do not contribute to global climate catastrophe. In a study from the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, a scenario is described where if 14% of travel in the world's cities was done by bike or e-bike in 2050, carbon emissions from urban transportation would be 11% lower than a scenario where efforts to promote sustainable transportation sidestep bicycling. So it's one of those things. It's like put your money where your mouth is, essentially.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rubber meets the road. Bicycle tire rubber specifically. It's one of those things to where you can specifically do something differently that makes a little difference. So, because making no change is a choice.
Right.
So bicycling is one of those things that you can do. And, speaking of the capitalism thing that I got into minutes ago, the line that says, if all that I can do is just stay on the move, keep a few cents from your grasp, that's all I need to prove. People who are in a massive hurry in their cars are often imposing their busyness on other people who are chill behind the wheel. Like I see people driving like totally sane, normal people all the time. And then some other psychomaniac that's like creating dangerous conditions because they're probably late for a meeting. They probably overslept. Somebody who is under the impression that they're late for something or in a hurry for something important are so much more likely to drive erratically. And our culture of chasing the almighty dollar literally puts lives at risk, because if someone's late for a meeting, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be pulling their phone out and texting everybody, hey, I'm on my way, while they're swerving in and out of traffic. And then a bike pops up in their path and bam, Hadron Collision.
Yeah.
Makes me crazy.
And I'll say too, with how much less I've traveled in 2020 just because of quarantine and isolating at home, it was great to go 2 months with not filling up my car, and not just for the money I save, but realizing that money I'm saving, where that's not going to, right? The corporations that are extracting these things in unethical and unsustainable ways just to benefit relatively few people, while, like forcing upon us this way of life that's been essentially fabricated, either if that's the suburbs traveling into the city, or the fact that I can't really walk safely to a grocery store where I live. That's all intentional.
Yeah. Our cities are designed very, very much to keep you inside those cages on wheels, which is a real shame. And because, honestly, bicycling is the most efficient form of human motion that there is. But anyway, so I love the lyrics on this song. The laugh on the outro, haha, is such a fantastic addition. And I'm so glad they left it in. And sometimes every now and then Todd will comment like on an Instagram post that I make, and he just writes, haha, with no punctuation or anything. And I'm like, Hadron Collision, haha. And he does it all the time. And it's so funny. And I just absolutely love that little bit of humor that closes out the song.
So what about YouTube comments, Greg? Did you find any?
I did. I found one that read, the ad that played before this song on YouTube was for O'Reilly Auto Parts. Oh, the YouTube irony. And another one said, to me, this is their definitive album in terms of thrashness so far. So those are a couple cool ones I found. What did you find?
And both of mine were from a live show at Red River Rampage.
Awesome.
And one said, haha, if this is indeed called Hadron Collision, That just seems so voivod.
I think they would support that.
And the other says, and the bike is on stage.
Dude, I was watching that video yesterday and I posted, they had like a trophy on the stage as well, which is hilarious in front of the drum set. And then that bike propped up next to the amps was absolutely hysterical. And somebody said that Chris wrote, or Todd or somebody rode it onto the stage at the beginning of the show and then rode it off the stage at the end of the show. So apparently the bike was very well used. Okay, so Keith, do you have any like big takeaway lesson for what the song makes you think about?
Yeah, Greg, I was thinking about the end of the music video for Failed Imagineer and how the camera pans over to a poster. It says everything is connected to everything else. And Hadron Collision is an angry reminder of that. So the song is a nudge for me to never get too comfortable in that comfort comes at the cost of our planet. And if we vote every time we spend money, well, I'm telling the world what kind of world I want to live in every time I fill up my gas tank or every time I drive the 15-minute walk to work. So I feel guilty when I listen to this song in my car. And I think that's actually a good thing. But the emotional reaction isn't just enough. It doesn't really mean anything if I don't also try to, do better by consuming less and reducing my own carbon footprint. And I think we can all help slow down our culture that has gotten way too fast by just slowing ourselves down.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of people listening to this song literally never ride bikes. It's just the way our society is set up. And as much as I would love to see a utopian society of people, riding bikes everywhere, if you live in the suburbs, being a cycling commuter is just not possible unless you want to be on your bike sometimes an hour or two just to get to work. And sometimes it's like, 100 degrees outside. Fahrenheit for all you Celsius listeners out there. And then you make that commute home again. It's just so sad that our businesses are in, often unaffordable places to live, so that people can't walk more or ride bikes more, because people often live so far away from where they work. And it's just really not accessible if a person doesn't have a motorized transportation. But consider this. The people who ride bikes, whether for exercise or commuting or fun, are not doing it to make people in cars' lives worse. People on bikes are not your enemy. People on bikes are not trying to ruin your day. People in cars are at the controls of a machine that on average weighs 2,800 pounds. Dude, a 2021 Ford F-150 weighs 4,000 to 5,000 pounds, depending on the options. Okay. You are literally in control of a killing machine. And people in trucks drive so rudely. Like, I'm telling the truth. Next time you get tailgated, truck. Next time someone speeds down your street, truck. Next time someone passes you dangerously, truck. The person on a bike is not there to make your life worse. You are maybe inconvenienced for 2 to 5 seconds when you have to drive around somebody on a bike. When you pass a person on a bike dangerously, you scare the daylights out of them. You give them panic attacks. You literally ruin their day by making them fear for their lives just for trying to use a carbon neutral form of transportation. And maybe that's the only transportation they can afford. Like the entire infrastructure of North American cities is made single-handedly to reward the person to not ride a bike. But some people just can't afford something different. Like, you know what I mean? We're not all made of money. You are entirely in control when you're behind the wheel. Next time you find yourself getting mad behind a cyclist, take a breath, because you need to consider that you are behind the wheel of a machine that can literally murder a human being. And that person on the bike is riding a 25 to 40 pound piece of welded steel, often off the rack at Walmart. Like, if they don't have a helmet on, which they might not be able to afford because good helmets cost 40 to 160 bucks. If you hit them, you will be a murderer. Like, please, if you're driving a car and you're behind a person on a bike and you are angry, please calm down. Please consider that when you drive like a maniac, it could quite literally be me, your friendly Unscripted Moments podcast with propaganda host, Greg, that you are bearing down on. Like, just seriously consider the consequences of your actions. Like, you could literally scare somebody so badly that like they just are afraid for their lives. It's a huge responsibility driving a vehicle. People on bikes are not your enemy. Please consider that. So with that said, Keith, would you like to do the honors of rating the song first?
Yeah, I love how unapologetic Hadron Collision is. It feels like a companion song to things I like.
Ooh, yeah.
As it's obviously what Todd likes, along with a little bit of what he doesn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a rager that's fun, but it still has a lot to say. So I'm going to give it a really solid 3.5.
Nice. I'm going to give it a 4. I love this song because of my personal history with cycling, with my interest in pedestrian safety. I have spoken at a few of the town traffic meetings in my town here. They know me. I'm going to leave it at that. But you know, with my interest in environmental degradation, reducing carbon footprint, and the absolutely fantastic pace of this song that has a very clear vocal hook, great solo, great sense of humor, I'm going to give it a 4. So that is our episode on Hadron Collision from Failed States. Lots of good rants tonight, Keith. Lots of science nerdiness, lots of cycling statistics and factoids. I didn't even tell you what the death rates were in countries around the world. Look those up. You know, it's not great around the world. But anyway, great time tonight with you, Keith. I had a blast recording this. If anybody out there is listening and want to find us, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at the handle propagandipod. You can email us at propagandipod@gmail.com. And thanks again to Aaron Scott from Attica, Marathon, and De La Hoya for the fantastic conversation. And we will see you next time.